In his extreme youth, Stoner had thought of love as an absolute state of being to which, if one were lucky, one might find access. In his maturity, he had decided it was the heaven of a false religion, toward which one ought to gaze with an amused disbelief, a gently familiar contempt, and an embarrassed nostalgia. Now in his middle age, he began to know that it was neither a state of grace nor an illusion. He saw it as a human act of becoming, a condition that was invented and modified moment by moment and day by day, by the will and the intelligence, and by the heart. I'm ahead of the curve, also known as James Bergman, and in this video today, I will be discussing Stoner by John Williams. This was first published in 1965. This piece was really hard to put down. I read this in like 4 days. And it's not even a necessarily short piece. I mean, it's about 300 pages, and I honestly just went straight through it. It engaged me on a level that I didn't really expect. And considering how the entire plot of this piece, for those who are unaware, it's basically a story about an ordinary guy, in some regard, who was born in, I think, 1915, and then he grew up past the First World War and then the Second World War, and so it's set in this historic time, and for example, many things happen to him that are oriented around the war, and it's essentially a story about love in some way. But not love necessarily for a person, but also for a passion. And I'm not going to spoil anything, I guess, unless it's by the end, but Stoner is somebody who, and this is the main character throughout the piece, it's written in the third person, which is also really interesting that it was done like that, because, and I know I'm perhaps going on a tangent because I was trying to explain a previous point, but anyway, the third person aspect of the piece needs to be considered, because normally books are first person and it gives you more of this insight into somebody's mind. But I think what Williams achieved with third person is something that was strictly relevant to the piece, to Stoner. What I feel like it did for the piece was help us paradoxically understand what was inside of his head, but also what was inside of everybody else's head, even though it was following Stoner as the main protagonist. Rather briefly put, he does find love, and this love is well, it's more of a sort of culturally forced monogamy, because back then in the 1915 and so on, marriages were, well, if you liked somebody, basically get married, and they barely knew each other, and they grew to resent each other, even though the main protagonist was trying to keep this love intact, but it was virtually impossible since his girlfriend resented him for a few reasons, which I don't need to go into. And so the book is, roughly speaking, as I said, about love. And Stoner, from the beginning, he was working as a farmhand for his father and his mother, and I guess he assumed that was what he was going to do until he changed what he wanted to do, and he became an academic. He became a teacher, and this was down to the advice of one of his lecturers, I believe. And then from then on, he became a lecturer for, I think, 40 years by the end. And Stoner genuinely loved his job. And there are situations where he comes into these challenges to do with love, to do with people. Not that it's really a spoiler, he kind of wants to be with somebody else temporarily, and there's this whole thing, and by this point, his wife is so numb, but also she's well, equally to how he is a bit of piece of work. Both of them are just, I guess, put together. They are a combination of sadness in some sense. But as sad as this piece is at times, I think that overall what we can learn is that, and this is the main thesis of the book, which is an ordinary guy can have a fulfilled and interesting life, even though there are hurdles along the way. He can still find a meaning, which in Stoner's case was in writing books and being an academic. And so I'm not going to make this review very long, because I honestly just wanted to get it out there as much as possible for anybody, for any of you to read, because this is really, really a good book. It's great, and I would highly recommend. And you know, you could read this and say, I guess, like, it's boring, but that's kind of the point in some way. Like, that is kind of the point. From a personal perspective, though, I didn't find it boring myself. I was glued to the page, and this helps especially because of Williams's writing, which is great. It is beautiful. There are so many great descriptions and contemplations throughout the piece that are composed in such a great way, especially towards the end, which I won't go into, but not that I need to, because I guess as the climax of the book gets to where it goes, the writing is adaptive to the mentality of the protagonist, Stoner, and just even the last page is just fantastic. The writing is, as I said, beautiful, and you know, even if the story is quite, I don't know, because some people would say it's boring, it's about an ordinary dude, and like, dramatic things do happen, in all fairness, but it isn't this Dostoevskian novel where people are going on this this crime, I don't know, agenda, that they're not trying to form a revolution like in Demons. It is very much a simplistic, but also really not at the same time. I think it's just the fact that he is an ordinary guy, and in conjunction with the idea that the writing just suits that. I mean, because on one side you have this ordinary narrative, right? And then on the other side of that, the way that it's portrayed and told is in the opposite spectrum. It's in a very flowery and very literary manner, and so it's just perfect, like juxtaposition between an ordinary story and an extraordinary prose. So yeah, it's so good, and I just recommend it wholeheartedly. I gave this a 5 stars on Goodreads. I think it's great. Again, I mean, I could go more into depth, but at the same time, I think this is a book that leaves you with a feeling instead of a philosophical analysis, right? That's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of how I felt with No Longer Human, by Ozai Dazai. Whilst there is philosophy to be found in that, and there is to be found in Stoner, I just, it's one of those books that just leave you in a state of catharsis, but also non-catharsis. And it's just this mixture of feelings that it leaves you with, which really, well, it really gripped me. And yeah, it's just a beautiful book. So yeah, that's literally it for this review. It's not really a long one, and it's not like this great analytical video, but I think if you've read the piece yourself, or if you're thinking of it, it's probably better that I don't know, it just needs to be experienced rather than analyzed. I think it's just one of those books that you just have to feel the narrative. You have to feel the flow of the characters. But yeah, no, I'm not used to doing these kind of short videos, but I hope you'll pardon me for not being so in depth this time. But basically, yeah, just read this book, read Stoner by John Williams. Phenomenal. Yeah, so thank you for watching, guys, and I hope you check out the piece. And if you have already read it, then please let me know what you thought of it. All right, see you guys.